What If Sonic was created by Gerald Robotnik? Reboot. Chapter 1. Power and Potential. G'day everyone, Rune here. And for my 1000 subscriber special, I've decided to reboot my very first What If. What If Sonic was created by Gerald Robotnik? Now, I just want to clarify that it's mostly the start of this What If that's getting rebooted, as I didn't write the later parts until recently, and they are still getting written. The reason I'm rewriting the start of this thing is because there are several story points at the start that just don't make sense in the original version, and there are also some points of the messy and confusing multiverse of Sonic that I want to try and clean up. On a slightly different note, as this entire series is going to be my sub-special for a while, I have decided to go all in and have all of the visuals for this story be commissioned art, done in the line art/comic book style. This is why this special is going to take place over a long period of time, as at the writing and recording of this, I have yet to finish the final chapters, and the artist kind of needs those if they're going to do their job. Also, there's the fact that art is a very complicated and time-consuming process, so it's going to take a while for this story to be done. With all of that said, let's get into our story. Just like in the canon, Gerald is a scientist working for Gunn in order to get funding to search for a cure to a medical condition plaguing his granddaughter, Maria. As Gerald is a staunch pacifist, he is very not happy with the idea of his creations being used for destruction. As such, he decides to play it sneaky by giving his creations free will and a moral compass. This way, he hopes that they will not be used for destruction and will only fight when the cause is just. One of these creations is a robot, which is one of the many creations of some Mobians from ancient times, which they had left behind. And this, I think, is a good time to explain one of the aspects of this What If, which will be very important later. See, in the original games, it's never explained how these Sonic and human worlds interact, or how Sonic and his friends constantly go from one to the other, or how there can be an entire ancient temple built by ancient echidnas in the human world. So, in this What If, I want to try giving my own interpretation and explanation. In this history, the Sonic world and the human world have had an intrinsic connection since the beginning of known history. While no one knows how or why this is the case, it is proven to be the case due to the vast amount of evidence. Not only in the form of written accounts and murals, but also all of the stuff that the animal-like people, which have been dubbed Mobians by the ancient humans, left behind. Such as the temple in Mystic Ruins and the robot that Gerald has modified. This link has caused portals to open at random all over both worlds, causing people from one to end up in the other. While in ancient times, Mobians were viewed as either deities or demons, in recent history, everyone on Earth knows that these Mobians are just extremely lost. There are even agencies set up all over the world where these unintended tourists can get a place to stay and food until they can either go home or start up a new life on Earth. Same goes for the world of Mobius. While several attempts at finding a reliable way to send these people back have been made, they have sadly all ended in failures thus far. While it is still unknown why this connection exists, it is theorized that the Chaos Emeralds may have something to do with it. The very first recorded event of a Mobian getting stuck on Earth explicitly mentions a gemstone matching the description of the green Chaos Emerald being in the Mobian's possession. Now with that little history lesson out of the way, let's get back to the main story. One of Gerald's attempts at creating a living creature that may hold the key to curing his granddaughter is the bile lizard, which, needless to say, does not turn out how Gerald hoped. The poor creature is completely unable to sustain itself without a life support system powered by chaos drives, due to its unnatural growing speed. And I can't imagine having its internal organs in a constant state of failing and regenerating would be pleasant. Just look at Deadpool and how he turned out. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, it is around this time that Gerald first comes into contact with Black Doom. As the Black Comet is passing Earth on its way to somewhere else, Black Doom is in a prime position to offer his help to the Professor. Black Doom offers his genetic material for Gerald to use for the project, but in exchange, the being that Gerald creates must then deliver the Chaos Emeralds to Black Doom in 50 years. Gerald agrees to this because A, it's his best shot at curing his granddaughter, and B, whether or not the emeralds appear on Earth is entirely luck, and last time all 7 were on Earth was back when one of the ancient echidna tribes had ended up in the mystic jungle after a calamity in their own world. So Gerald has no reason to believe that all 7 emeralds will somehow end up on Earth in 50 years. Now here is where history takes a turn. Due to the absolute nightmare that is the bile lizard's existence, Gerald is very cautious about using Black Doom's DNA, considering how supposedly powerful it is. He wants to cure his granddaughter, but he knows that she would never be happy if her life came at the cost of countless living creatures being in a constant state of suffering. So, for his second attempt, he decides to lower the bar a little and not attempt for a perfect recreation of everything in Black Doom's DNA. Instead, he decides to pick a handful of aspects and put them into the creation. Examining Black Doom's DNA, he discovers 2 main components with which to base his creation. The raw power, which is what gives Black Doom his strength and ability to control chaos energy with such efficiency, or its potential for growth, which is what makes the Black Arms race so adaptable and persistent. Eventually, he decides por qué los dos, and creates a life form with each, along with a handful of other aspects which were always going to be included, such as high intelligence and borderline immortality. To further his attempt to separate the 2 creations from their DNA donor, he designs their physical forms based off of the Mobians, specifically hedgehogs. Meaning that these 2 are hybrids of Black Arms, humans, and Mobians. Thus, Shadow, the embodiment of power, and Sonic, the embodiment of potential, are born. Now, while the 2 hedgehogs are technically twins, Shadow is the first to come out of his pod. Sonic takes a little longer due to not having as much raw power in his body boosting his development. However, this added time allows him to develop a little something that his 2 months older brother didn't, which is his inhuman running speed. Also during those 2 months, Shadow, who had spent the majority of his time waiting for Sonic to come out of his pod, had developed a strong protective instinct, not only for his younger brother, but for Maria and Gerald as well. Gerald and Maria were the only ones who would let anywhere near Sonic's pod while he was still in there. When Sonic is finally out of his pod, he, Shadow, and Maria instantly form a familial bond. While Sonic calls her their big sister, Maria kind of considers herself more their mother. Sonic is very naive and impulsive, which causes him to get in trouble with the other scientists in the Ark, either due to him pulling a prank on them or due to him accidentally making a mess. This usually leads to Maria scolding him before having him clean up his mess. Shadow, by contrast, is a lot more calm and mature, but has a tendency to come off as cold and aloof. The only ones that seem to be able to read him are Sonic and Maria, though there is one thing in the family's dynamic that will never change, and that is Sonic and Shadow's competitive streaks. Thankfully, Maria always finds a way for the brothers to put their competitive sides towards something productive, or at least something that is a lot less messy than another one of their prank wars. One day, while Sonic is impatiently waiting for Maria to finish something so the 3 of them can hang out, he and Shadow discover something incredible. They can communicate telepathically. Due to Sonic impatiently repeating how bored he is in his head, his thoughts end up leaking into the hive mind that the Black Arms has. As Sonic and Shadow are the only ones with Black Doom DNA within many, many light years, the only one that could possibly hear the frustrated mental complaining is Shadow. Thus, causing Shadow to tell Sonic to stop complaining, only for Sonic to say he hadn't said anything, and the 2 realizing that Shadow had heard Sonic's thoughts. Thrilled at the idea of having such a cool secret power, Sonic convinces Shadow to keep it between them. Through much experimentation, they are able to figure out how to communicate via the hive mind, though they don't know that's what it is. They also discover that it requires a lot of focus or emotion. Not long after, Sonic comes across Maria playing with a young boy while sneaking through the Ark via the vents. Hopping out right in front of them, he greets them cheerfully before asking Maria who her friend is. Instead of answering, however, Maria gives Sonic a look that all mothers give their children when they know they're up to something. Calmly but sternly, she asks Sonic why he was hiding in the vents and why he's so far from the labs. averting his eyes, Sonic tries to play it off, saying that Shadow is in a bad mood and Sonic simply didn't want to be in the blast range. But Maria isn't fooled and presses, making Sonic confess that Shadow's angry and is currently looking for him because Sonic put ketchup in his shoes. Maria lets out an exasperated groan before her attention is drawn back to the young boy who is currently looking between the two of them in confusion. Giving a tired but fond smile, Maria introduces her little brother/son to the boy, Abraham Tower. Sonic grins, telling Abraham that it'll be great to finally have another person to play with. And so the days pass like this. Sonic remains the lovable troublemaker of the arc, breaking up the mundanity with various pranks and silly activities, such as games and little plays which he somehow always manages to drag Shadow and Abraham into participating in. Shadow continues to be the protective and somewhat mature older sibling, slowly warming up to Abraham as he sees how fond Maria and Sonic are of him. Maria continues to be the mother of the group, worried and exasperated with the hedgehogs' antics, but loving them all the same. She also tells them stories about Earth, about Mobius, and about her younger cousin Ivo, and her hopes to see them all one day. However, one day, this happy norm comes to a horrible end. One day, while hiding in the vents from an enraged Shadow, Sonic comes across a mass of strangers, wearing unfamiliar uniforms and carrying guns, entering the Ark's hangar. Terrified for his family, Sonic hastily begins to crawl back through the vents to the labs, thanking the heavens that Abraham had been sent to Earth to visit his grandmother and isn't on the Ark right now. Reaching the main lab, Sonic sees Maria and Shadow looking for him through the grate, and kicks it open before jumping out right in front of them, startling them both. Before either of them can recover enough to speak, Sonic tells them that there are strangers with guns in the hangar. Now, while Sonic is a troublemaker and a prankster, one thing that he has never done is cry wolf. Plus, he's a terrible liar. So Maria and Shadow both instantly know that he's telling the truth, and something is seriously wrong. Worried for Gerald, the three of them rush to his private study, where he is sorting through some documents on his computer. As soon as the three burst in, he's on his feet, asking what's wrong. Frantic, Sonic describes what he'd seen in the hangar, and Gerald's eyes widen in horror. Rushing about the room, he begins to gather various things, muttering about something under his breath. He then rushes up to the three and hands Sonic a data drive and Shadow a strange key, telling them to hold on to them and not lose them. He then tells Maria to take the boys to the escape pods and get them out. Distressed, Sonic asks why Gerald isn't coming with them, and he tells his grandchildren that he'll catch up, but there's something he needs to do first. With the final command to go, the three run as fast as they can to the escape pods, with Sonic running ahead in hopes of getting them ready ahead of time, only to remember that he has no idea how to work these things. When Maria and Shadow enter the room, the intruders are not far behind them. Thinking only of the safety of her brothers/sons, Maria orders the boys to get into a pod each while she starts them up. Not wanting to argue with her in this situation, the boys do as they're told. Just as Maria is about to set the timer for the pod release so she can get to one herself, a man with a gun bursts into the room. Spotting Maria at the control panel, he opens fire, shooting her in the back. Seeing her hurt, Sonic and Shadow desperately try to reopen the pod so they can go to her, desperately wanting to do something in order to save her. Knowing that her time is up, Maria smiles at the boys, thanking them for being her light in this place and asking them to now be that light for everyone else, both on Earth and on Mobius. Almost in slow motion, the boys watch as Maria presses the button to activate the pods. In his state of desperation, Sonic calls out to her. So emotionally lost, he doesn't even realize that he's accidentally called Maria Mother for the first and what will be the last time. Tears falling from her eyes, Maria watches as her boys are placed in cryosleep and launched out of the station. While Maria had believed that both Sonic and Shadow would end up on Earth, this would sadly not be the case. For while the pods were falling towards the Earth, fate chose that moment for one of the interdimensional portals to open up, right in front of the path of Sonic's pod. While Shadow lands on Earth, eventually being found by Gun, Sonic lands on Mobius. There, he remains in his pod for 50 years, kept in cryosleep because of the pod getting slightly scrambled during the jump. Finally, 50 years later, Sonic is accidentally released from his pod by one of Eggman's badniks. Surprised and confused, he immediately leaps into action, destroying the bot and releasing the tiny animal inside. Surprised, Sonic asks what's going on, and they explain that a man called Dr. Robotnik is turning the animals of the world into power sources for his machines in an attempt to take over the world. Sonic's mind instantly flashes to Maria and Gerald, and he wonders just who this doctor is and why he's using their name. Because world domination is not something that either Maria or Gerald would have even considered. At the back of his mind, he hears Maria's warm voice asking him and Shadow to be the light for the people of both Earth and Mobius. When had she asked that? Questions for later. He has an imposter to beat up. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as we watch Sonic begin his journeys on Mobius, meet his friends, and try to figure out a way to return to Earth. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.